mean, if I live my life, I was saying before, if I go back, I would be the person that I am today,
Absolutely.
who I am. And I'm so grateful to have lived this life, the life that I'm being given. And I think that I know you would take it and you would go very far. And I'm saying this in public because I want you to do it. I would say to Brandon, I know you will be in CNN, man. I know, I can see it. I can see you doing that.
Absolutely.
And doing this.
Right.
Because this is the things that people we need to bring outside. Sometimes we give people, okay, you need to take the SAT, you need to take this, you need to do this. But learning people's story could be a game changer.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the B-Xcellent podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Brandon Harrison Smith. Today, I have the honor of interviewing Dr. Luciano Castillo, who is an endowed chair at Purdue University's Mechanical Engineering Department. He's also a distinguished alumni from the State University of New York at Buffalo. And more importantly, he's my advisor. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Brandon. And I don't want to say this, I'm very proud of you for creating something so excellent and needed right now in academia.
Thank you. Before we get into some of the questions about your journey or your STEM advice, I'd just like to start simply. Where are you from? What's your Black background?
I was born in Puerto Rico.
Okay.
I was born and raised on 2 of 4 children.
Mm.
So I moved from Puerto Rico when I was 22.
Oh, wow.
Centuries ago.
Wow.
And the funny thing, when I moved here, I said, well, you know what? I'm just going to move to finish my undergrad and maybe finish a master. Then I come back.
Oh, wow.
And that was decades ago.
Exactly.
Yes.
We won't get into how long ago that was. All right. So now, what are some, favorite things from your childhood experiences that you grew up with? You have a favorite food, a favorite hobby, or a thing that you like to do when you were in Puerto Rico, when you were younger?
The not necessarily the food. I think what was so excited was when I was a child, my father, emigrated from Dominican Republic. And then he started from the police, became a salesman, until later became an entrepreneur. So being the second of 4 and the oldest man, it meant that I had to work with him and do my schoolwork exceptionally well.
Absolutely.
So at that time, I did not appreciate it because I felt like, hey, I'm being treated like a slave. I'm being working weekends and this, and you pay me this little money. But I became to realize what I am now, I mean, doing business with your father, and I think I started like 9, I learned how important it was to service others. How that you're doing this to help somebody.
Yeah.
And that make a very important print in my life. The way I am today, everything. I started from that. So the principle of work ethics, I learned from my father at that time. So at that time, I did not appreciate it. You know what it is? When you're a teenager and you had to get up at 7 to go to work.
Yeah.
And when you went out the night before. So it was very rough, but that is what I learned, my work ethics, everything that I am.
Yes. I can definitely relate to that. I think my dad is definitely someone that serves as my foundation of what a work ethic is. This guy, he's phenomenal. He wakes up early, he works out, he trains, he does his job. Then sometimes he does a second job after his first job.
Wow.
Comes home, he's definitely, his work ethic is inspiring, and I think, when you're younger, you don't appreciate it because you feel like you're working like a dog all the time with these projects or things you got to do. But then it built the foundation for who you are later on.
Exactly.
It actually serves as something very special that people even notice about you.
In fact, I would tell you this. My conclusion was, when I compare my childhood versus my children, it's too bad that my children did not have a father that they did not grow up in a business.
Oh, I see.
Because I had to, you're part of it. The family had to be doing everything.
Right. There's a bit of a grind that comes with it.
Right. As a child now, you go to your activities and you watch TV, you play video games. In that era, you just You need to work.
Yes.
And like you, right? Your dad is pumping iron. You need to match the old man, right?
You got to match the intensity for sure.
That's right. That's right.
For sure. That's great. So now my next question to you is like, what is the first experience you've had with STEM? Like what really got you started on this journey?
Brandon, this is a great question. And I was reflecting when I was the last 2 nights about our podcast today. And something goes back to my father.
Mm-hmm.
And I tell you, he had businesses in Puerto Rico. And one day we were going to visit a client.
Okay.
And they were in the south part. So there's a refinery.
Okay.
And he was driving. I must have been like 9.
Mm-hmm.
He says, you see all of that? Meaning the refinery.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That is designed and done by an engineer, chemical engineers.
Oh, wow.
And they solve problems. That's what he said. I mean, you're talking about a guy that was a police that became an entrepreneur. And that at that moment, that's what I decided. I want to be an engineer.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's what I decided. In fact, because I remember when I was in high school, I was struggling if I should go to medicine or to go to engineering. And I didn't want to, I love medicine, but I didn't want to have to touch people. But I didn't know what I know now, that you could have done an MD, PhD.
Yes.
And do research in medicine.
Yes.
But at that time I said, hey, engineering sounds cool.
Yeah.
But I loved it.
Yes.
And that's where my passion became. And when you're working with him, you were fixing cars, tires, you were solving problems.
Yeah.
Every time you were dealing with clients, I was solving problems with the employees as well.
Right.
So that's my first experience with STEM.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so from there, you started your, eventually you got to the University of Puerto Rico at my ages and then transferred. Can you tell us a little bit about that journey?
Yeah, I started at the University of Puerto Rico, Mayagüez. I started studying math. And then after 2 years, I transferred to another university, Polytechnic University. And then I said, no, this is not what I want. I really wanted to learn why things where the questions came from. When I would study, I wanted to learn why this is this equation. So I then transferred to Buffalo, SUNY Buffalo. That's where I did my undergrad and my PhD in mechanical engineering. And actually, this goes back to what I was saying about my father, right? This is my childhood, right? And this is very important because parents play an important role as role models, like your dad, but also as mentors. So my last year in undergrad, I met my PhD advisor. I met this guy, actually. He was so passionate. I was thinking, it was the class of propulsion, gas dynamics. That was gas dynamics. Okay, so we're looking at compressible flow and in thermal. And then he was talking. I remember, I would see this white guy, like 6'2", and very young and be so animated and passionate. And I remember in the class, he would be saying, I could not sleep last night. I was awake at 3 a.m. looking at this problem. And I said, you know what? I would like to be like him. So I went and talked to his PhD student. How can I become his student? Oh, wow. And that's how I ended up in grad school. And then his PhD students told me, well, I don't think master students could work with him because he doesn't hire masters. He only hires PhDs. But I imagine that at those days, I could not picture myself doing a PhD, right? So the long story short, over time, I enrolled into the master program, and I enrolled into a lot of independent studies with him, with Dr. George. His secretary, he emailed me, and he says, you can't do that. So I make an appointment with his secretary, and then she set up a meeting with him. Remember, I'm talking, this is Luciano, the 24-year-old. I was afraid to go to a professor. Absolutely. I never asked any questions. So to have to go to this guy speaking in English and a white guy, I was so intimidated. I was afraid, terrified. Right. And he invited me for breakfast. We have coffee, we talk. And he was the best person I ever met. Super nice. And that's how I ended up in master. And then later he said, you should do a PhD. Let's forget about the master. So went straight to PhD. And that role models are critical. And actually at the core of everything I do, it goes around that mentoring and being a role model. And role model doesn't have to be people that look like you.
All right. So, absolutely. No, that's a fascinating story.
Yeah.
I took two things from that. One, it's important to have questions or just a natural curiosity when you pursue education, period.
Yes, and life.
Yes, and life for sure.
I think is being curious is at the core of discovering the majesty of this universe.
Absolutely.
Of life.
Absolutely.
So when you approach life with that, I think you will be a better researcher because you will be curious about learning something new.
And then another takeaway I had just now was, if you're interested in working in someone's lab, go ahead and talk to the grad students. Talk to them. They're going to probably be the most insightful to your experiences.
That's correct. Probably the best feedback you will get it from them.
Right.
Remember, the advisor may want to impress you, may want to hire you. The students will tell you the real story.
Right.
How they're treated, how comfortable they feel.
Right.
And just don't talk to one, talk to few of
talk
them.
To many for sure.
Yeah. Some labs have a different culture, and I want to mention this. Like any academic institution, the institution have its own culture. The labs have their own culture.
Yes.
And not every culture fits who you are. So this is very important to talk to many people because their advisors, they micromanage the students. Maybe for a style of a student that like that may work.
For sure.
But for somebody more creative, that may not be the best fit.
Absolutely. I just wanted to add something to that. There's the culture. So I think it's important to talk to both groups because you're going to establish different relationships. There's the culture you're going to need to have with your professor, but there's also the culture you're going to need to have the lab. So maybe it's not even just the professor. Maybe the professor is great, but the lab culture is not, and not conducive for you to work or do. And so that's important too. You're going to spend quite a bit of time with these people, and they're going to need to be people that you feel comfortable working with.
But it's the professor who set this stage.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's the professor. Because he or she creates the atmosphere and hires students with certain type. At least I do.
Yeah. Yes, for sure. For sure. So now your PhD was in propulsion.
Well, it was mechanical engineering. It was mainly in turbulence. Turbulence. I focused on turbulence. Very theoretical.
Yes.
Very theoretical. It was looking at scaling laws of turbulence applied to boundary layers. Looking at, if you look at an airfoil, look at it in the atmosphere, there's a closed surface, understanding the interaction of turbulence with the wall.
Okay. Can you give an example about that for some of the layman audience? Like when we're talking about boundary layers, why is that important to kind of explore or kind of understand even at a theoretical level?
Yeah, this is super critical because what happens between the flow field and the surface that will determine how much drag an airplane will need, how much heat that surface will have. So almost every problem dealing with cooling, heating, hypersonics is dealing with that interaction with the wall, that boundary layer.
Okay, so like how fast the airplane wants to go,
the interaction
of the air,
right? But then if you're looking at other problems like wind energy, look at the problem of wind energy, even solar panels, right? You have the wind flow over the panel, very close to the wall. There's a region where a lot of cooling and heating is taking place between the fluid flow and the wall. The efficiency of those panels is that interactions.
I see.
In wind energy, you have the performance of the power plant, right? Okay. You're taking kinetic energy from the flow to produce electricity. That is within the boundary layer. You have the atmosphere. Yeah. The atmospheric boundary about one kilometer. Within that, you have the boundary where the wind turbines are sitting. And that heating and cooling will take place there. Urbans, CO2 emissions in cities is the interaction of a boundary, the wall with the fluid flow. Okay. So it's the fluid flow with the proximity to the wall.
proximity to the surface of
right?
Of whatever structure you're talking about, whether it be a plane or
correct
buildings. Or,
yeah, and that's where molecular diffusion, the viscosity becomes important. But then if you have turbulence, now you have turbulence diffusion processes that also play a very, very important role. So you want to use that to minimize the drag, the energy consumption. Submarines, they operate with that principle as well.
Right. So your lab is basically a wind energy lab, right? Well, I mean, you do other things, but like that's primarily what you're known for.
I would say so look what happened, right? So I went from and I will tell you that story because this is very important. But basically, I mean, I was thinking as an assistant professor when I started my first job, actually in 1999 in Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. That's where I spent 12 years. But when I was there, I was just doing a little bit of extension of my PhD. Right? I was doing classical scaling laws of boundary layers. We were looking at more computational part. But then one day, one of my PhDs was going to Johns Hopkins. And then I was talking to my friend, Charles Meneval. We were going to co-advise a postdoc. We were trying to define a problem, right? So we're looking more of classical turbulence problems, right? And then I went to visit one of my colleagues. I was just coming from my office to the upper office. And I saw one of my colleagues. And I said, hey, Mickey, what are you doing? And he said, well, Lucian, I'm writing a proposal that is due next week. Yeah, what kind of proposal? Well, there's a new program from NSF that is called Energy for Sustainability that just came out. So I look at the call. I call Charles. Hey, Charles, there's this new call for Energy for Sustainability. And I know you and me, we always wanted to do something on renewable energy. We started exploring. And then that's how we ended up with wind energy. I'm serious. And it was mainly because I did not want to train a postdoc on something that will make it hard for him to build a career. That single decision, this is 2006. That's when I started doing wind energy. That single decision to do it because you want to help a student and how the universe connect and the messages, right? I opened my eyes and then we moved to wind energy because look at this. When you look at turbulence, there's a lot of turbulence within the wind turbines. You have a machine rotating. The flow behind that is very turbulent. So you have turbulence, you have a boundary layer. And I'm like, hey, you have the things that I love.
Right.
And that's how I ended up in wind energy.
Wow.
That single decision changed my life.
Wow.
That one.
Speaking of students, what kind of students do you look for when, selecting students, whether it be, students who are just generally interested or postdocs or PhD students? What kind of students are you looking for? What traits?
Yeah, normally I don't look at even GPAs. I don't look at the resumes, nothing. I'm looking at the person. And I'm trying to find, one, is this person hungry enough? That's what I'm trying to judge. And then if he or she will be a kind of persistent student that will, no matter what happened, will continue.
Wow.
And that's what I'm looking. I'm looking for persistent. I'm looking for passion. And I'm looking for somebody that will stick to it. And because it's a long journey.
Yeah.
I mean, when you do a PhD, you spend 5 years. I mean, there's students that I met when they were teenagers, 19 years old, 18. 20-something years later, we're still friends. So this is a long-term commitment with people. So I pick people that are very driven, hungry, and that they're also passionate.
Yeah.
That for me are the ingredient for success.
Absolutely.
Not just in PhD, in any field.
Okay. If a student was interested in joining your lab, like what's the way to get involved, for them to get involved? What's the best way? Yeah,
normally I like the students, if they're at Purdue, to do undergrad research. That's one way. They could work with my PhD student with you. Or, you're a postdoc.
Right.
But there are others that could get involved with the Summer Institute. Every summer at the Summer Institute on this last year, we did it on climate change and coastal resiliency. And that's the best way to do it.
All right. So speaking of Summer Institute, so that's part of this Blue Integrated Partnership that you're a part of. Can you explain more about, how you got involved in that and what that exactly is?
This is a consortium, actually. As you know, I have always been very passionate about giving, right? I mean, at the end of the day, if what I'm doing is not serving society, one more paper means nothing to me. Okay. So everything that I do has to have something in society. Every questions that I do in research is driven by something that is happening in society that I feel I could make an impact. So this consortium, I think, many of us, we come from humble beginnings, and the road is hard. And I think my job is not only to succeed as a faculty, but can I make the road better for others? A lot of people in our community are left behind. A lot of people with great talent are not being tapped. So when I was in RPI, I want to mention this story. I created a consortium with Cornell, Syracuse, University of Puerto Rico, RPI, and later we added Johns Hopkins to put more minorities in academia at that time. And I learned a lot about mentoring, creating programs. When I came to Purdue from Texas, I saw that I could make a very unique contribution at Purdue. And that is in creating these summer programs. But then one time NASA invited me to be part of a panel discussion about what are the things that needs to be created at the national level to create a STEM pipeline. And during that time, that's what I learned. And with discussions with other people, that we need to create a consortium. And I have done it before, right? Like the one that I did at an RPI. This was mainly R1 institutions with Puerto Rico. Here it's like, hey, Purdue has this amazing facility, great resources, great history. Why not to partner with HBCUs and minority serving institutions to help them elevate their ability to do research so they could also grow? Many times a place like Purdue will partner with another school. And of course, we want to get minority students. This is not to just do that. This is to enhance their institutions, enhance their community. So we created this consortium. And actually, this was supported by Tom Fu, who is a division director in ONR. So I discussed the idea with him. He said, Luciano, make some adjustment in your ecosystem. We made it. And then he funded this. He funded this, the initial part, for $3 million. And then we have been very successful. In fact, you have experienced a lot of the activities we have done. And then out of that, we're now moving at a stage where we feel we could make a significant transformation, not just mentoring and enhancing their schools. We're now looking at grand challenges like climate change, the problem of security, the problem of precision medicine. And those are areas that this consortium has. So now we're moving to the next level, phase 2, where I believe we would make gigantic transformation. In other words, I think that for us to change diversity, not only we need to bring people in the pipeline, but they have to solve problems that could change the world.
Absolutely.
Look, Brandon, if you look what happened in sports, it's not that Black Hispanics, they do well. I mean, many times we transform this sport.
Absolutely.
The Michael Jordan, the Tiger Woods, the Serena Williams, right?
Absolutely.
Well, those people exist in academia. They are in our communities.
Absolutely.
In our poor zip codes, or they could be in a poor region in Latin America or in the Caribbean. And all we need to provide is the correct love, support, strong discipline, of course, like your dad did to you, right?
Absolutely.
And then create the environment for them to succeed.
Absolutely.
And I think we would see it. And this is what I'm so excited. I think So the problem of climate change is one that I'm so passionate, and where many of our own people are working. And I believe you will see from this program, when you will see the phase 2, I believe you will see people that some of them will end up winning Nobel Prize. I have no doubt.
Absolutely.
Because we're looking at bold problems, and we're challenging our diverse community. I'm talking about inclusive, right?
Right.
So look, I don't want you to solve this problem for industry,
right?
Like what we do in the books, no, in courses, right? Or I want you to solve this small problem with a faculty on a lab. No, I want to tackle big, nasty problems. How can we capture CO2? And we could do it.
And some of these problems that you're addressing not are big because they also impact some of these people's communities themselves, you know? So I know the focus some of this is with Puerto Rico, and some of the issues they might have with energy, or the hurricanes that come through and wreck the areas and things of that nature. So these aren't just big challenges. These are challenges that have a huge impact, I think, as well. Not just like the broader impact of just the students, but just a global, impact as well, So I think.
But Brandon, hold on a second.
Okay.
You talk about Puerto Rico. Of course, you may say, okay, Luciano is biased because he was born there. He want to stay there, right? He want to go from West Lafayette to Puerto Rico to
well, I mean, you stayed here this
warm
long.
up, right?
You stayed.
But there's a reason behind that.
Okay.
When you're in an island, you're completely isolated from everything.
Yes.
And then that island, when happens to be in the path of hurricanes, the way we see this is the best living laboratory to study climate change.
It's impacted the most, probably.
Exactly. You have extreme events, hurricanes, earthquake.
Yes.
Rising sea level. Absolutely. You're losing coastal lines. You have the problems of how you make the island sustainable.
Right.
Why you will import fuel.
Oh, yeah.
To then burn it.
Right.
And then use water. It's ridiculous. Why not to use
fuel is very dangerous,
and expensive.
Yes.
So why not to use the island itself, the sun and the heat, the wind, to produce clean energy?
Absolutely.
Make the island a completely renewable island.
Absolutely.
100%. So this is what we're working. And I want, like this summer, the students have the experience to go to small island within the island to understand shoreline degradation, coral reef. They study, they learn, and they have a first-hand experience with the problem.
Absolutely. I think that's something that's invaluable. A lot of times in research, you don't necessarily always get a chance to kind of get that firsthand experience. And it makes a difference. I know that from my own PhD, doing clinical studies for a device that could work in, like, for instance, Kano, Nigeria, without ever stepping foot there, I would have never understood really how appropriate my device or the technology I was building for that community. And so having that, I will say having that firsthand experience is so invaluable, and it makes you, I think, a little bit more in tune with the problems and challenges.
Of course. But look at your problem. If you were to go to Nigeria, but you don't want to go that far, you could go to Haiti, right? And you see the way people live. And you as a PhD student to work with the people that may use your technology, it will change the way you are.
Oh, absolutely.
And I think this is what we need to bring in education.
More immersion.
Yeah, that's exactly. I mean, the whole world is becoming more unified.
Yeah.
Scientists are becoming more unified. Well, the students' experience should be richer also. So, especially your generation, are more inclined to the well-being of the planet, the well-being of all of us. So the students are learning firsthand. Imagine, turbines are not designed for category 5, over 200 miles.
Right.
No, right? But some of the problems the students are looking, how they could design wind turbines, solar panels that could sustain that. How you could use AI and big data to then design materials that yet may not necessarily exist in its form, but will be able to sustain that category 5 and still produce the energy. How you even bring those wind turbines? I mean, do you have something rotating? Well, if you have CO2 in the atmosphere, what can you use the knowledge of turbulence and the interaction of the boundary layers with wind turbines to capture CO2? So these are things that we're doing in those institute. We're not only nurturing these students, not only do we teach them some of the basics, and then we create a very inclusive environment where people are treated like a family. But at the same time, they're exposed to hardcore problems, and I want them to think big.
Right.
And that's what we do in those summer institutes.
No, that's pretty amazing, pretty great. So I want to talk, briefly on some other things that you're also involved with, such as the Trailblazers in Engineering, which is like a multi-day workshop focused on preparing future outstanding engineering scholars for future engineering faculty careers. And that's actually where I met you, right?
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about that program and how you got involved with it?
Yeah, this is a great story. And, like I said, everything I do it because I believe on it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't touch anything because it's in fashion or because it will be money. And I remember my own journey. And it goes back, if you look at my whole trajectory, even when I started as a student, I didn't know what I was doing. I was lost. So when I started as a faculty, I moved into that. But one day, as a Endowed Chair professor, I met with my dean, Mon, who is now our president at Purdue. He met with me and then he said, Luciano, as an Endowed Chair, what problems do you see we have in the college that we must pay serious attention? And I said, this is a very good question. And I thought about it and I said, well, I think we don't have enough diversity. I think we need to blah, blah, blah. And then a few weeks later, he met with me and he told me, Luciano, I want to offer you to be a this faculty fellow. And then you work with Professor Arvin, my associate dean, and you develop whatever you want to do. And then I met with Arvin and I was telling Arvin, I think we should create something that PhD students could come to Purdue, and in a series of 3-4 days, we do what I used to do when I was in RPI. We mentor them, help them negotiate. How you negotiate a career, right? Post-COVID, academia change. How you become a professor. We're not trained like that.
Right.
So that's how we decided to do it. Again, my own life experiences or lack of it forced me to create things so the next generation.
Right.
And that's what I believe. I believe that as a faculty, I'm not just here to write papers and get money. I'm here to hopefully that the next generation, whether they're black or white or whatever they are, could be better because I was here. So that program has been very successful.
Absolutely.
I mean, it has been extremely successful for these students, for Purdue. And I'm very proud of that. Actually, I'm super proud of that program.
Yes.
And Arvin now as the dean, they is part of the college and it's making great differences. And there are many people involved, our staff. And I think that program will it is a national example right now. So I'm so happy about it.
And one last program, I know you got so many accolades, I won't go through all of them, but then you also are part of the National Academy of Engineering in Mexico. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, that's a big honor, actually. I was so touched by it. Okay. And I will tell you how I started that. When I was in Texas, I was moving from Texas to Purdue. I was 2017. And then close to that time, there was this issue with the border. We still have the border issue.
Yes.
And then, so one of my friends sent me a joke. And I, said, what we need to do is to create opportunities at the border.
Okay.
Instead of creating walls. So all you're doing is making things harder for people.
Mm-hmm.
So we created this consortium of the US-Mexico border, where what we wanted to do is to bring clean energy, water to the region to bring opportunities.
Mm.
And by you creating opportunities, there will be more wealth created for people.
Gotcha.
More education. Now, you could do that at the US-Mexico border, but just imagine that doing with Mexico and in other borders around the world,
mm-hmm.
where borders are not divisions, regions. They're not refugee camps. They are opportunity regions.
Mm.
And by creating opportunity for children in terms of education, you have water, you have energy, you could bring manufacturing, even national security problems like water security. Imagine you have a desert southwest. You bring water to a desert. You're even solving problems of tomorrow.
Mm.
So water security is a big deal. And then microchips, we have a chips act, creating manufacturing on the US-Mexico border. We create a lot of opportunities. This is the first, depending on the year, trading partner in the world for United States, Mexico. It's Canada and Mexico and China. So our friends at the border could be prosperity regions.
Mm.
And that's what I started creating that. And again, it goes back to my passion to look at society and how can we solve problems for society?
Absolutely.
That's what drives me. As an engineer, we solve problems.
Yes.
Right. And I see the kids and I'm like, they could have been my children.
Mm.
So it always goes back to their compassion for humanity.
No, that's powerful. Very powerful. The next thing I wanted to go through is a little bit of a reflection piece now. So as you reflect on your career, you've been very, very successful. However, even with that success, you wouldn't be an engineer if you didn't reflect back on things and be like, you know what, if I could have done this a little bit better, tighten this up, this might have been better for me. What kind of things could you reflect on your early version of yourself in your career? And what advice would you give yourself?
What advice I would give myself?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. This is a tough question. And actually I was thinking with the other day, I wake up my girlfriend at 3 a.m. and I was thinking about the podcast, right? And this is a tough question. And I think, people, and I wish one day you do a podcast on find somebody extremely successful and talk about their failures. And it's very unfortunately that sometimes when you look at my record and the students see it, they may see that this person is so gifted, so special.
Mm-hmm.
But in reality, we all come from the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like the fears that many students feel, the intimidation, I felt it. Like if you have met Luciano when I was 20, you would not believe it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm that person because of the insecurity, the fears that I had.
Okay.
Right? Not being good enough. Am I smart enough to do it? Right?
Right.
And you would not believe that. The failures that I've had over the life is what made me who I am today.
Mm.
So all of these experiences, and we didn't talk about them, they help me become stronger. When I was telling you about a student that is persistent, I was determined. Once my father showed me that refinery, that I was going to be an engineer no matter what.
Mm.
Okay. And I just don't want to get a degree. I want to learn, deeply learn. So when I look at the whole journey, yes, if I've had programs like the one I'm talking was good, but the one thing I would have done differently, my career as a scientist, I would have loved to do more these social problems leading from social driven problems to the fundamentals to innovation. Because we do a lot of innovations in my lab. And I would have loved to have done that early on in my career.
Yeah.
But everything else.
Yeah.
No, I don't regret it.
Yeah.
I love what I do. because at the end I'm serving society.
It's that wanting to get to where you got to sooner, because like you probably could have tackled even more things.
But I think would have got me where I am. I mean, it took me a long time.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this has been a long journey. And I was telling Maria, that my girlfriend, and I said, what I am today, whatever happened, I needed it to be who I am.
Yes.
But you told me about what I would advise Luciano at that age. And I think this is what I learned later in life. And through those failures,
sure,
we have many. I learned, if I would have said that to Luciano when I was very young, 18 a year, just love yourself. Love who you are. And that is hard. When for us minority, when you don't have the same color as everybody, you always feel like, I'm good enough. Even when you are a professor, even when you have achieved everything, I'm still good enough. And then I realized later in life, the beauty in our color, the beauty that is when you feel at peace with who you are, that you truly love the person that you have become. All of my decisions, all of them, are still based. If I look back, do I regret what I have done? Like, for me, it goes back to the issue. I want to make sure when my life is done, that at least I did something good for the young generation. So that goes back to the point that everything has to have something good for society. But at the same time, I didn't love myself enough at that time. So you have a lot of insecurity. And then you always have to feel that you have to prove stuff.
Yeah.
And you live, I lived my entire career like that.
Right.
Until my 40s.
Right. So you're fighting the world, but then you're also fighting yourself, because your self is questioning.
Yeah, you're proving who you are.
Right.
Imagine that.
Right.
Can you imagine that? Having to prove?
We live it.
Yes, it's painful.
It is definitely.
It's energy exhausting. And then as a result of that, you're less creative. As a result of that, you take less risk. So this goes back to the tipping point in my career was when I was moving from Texas to Purdue, because that's when I started caring what anybody thinks. And then I started thinking really big. So the US-Mexico border, that's one consortium. But then the other one that I didn't talk about is COVID one. Then we have the Blue Integrated Partnerships. All of those not only magnify in terms of the impact, but in terms of the resources.
Right.
Now we don't talk about proposals of 1 million. We talk about 100 millions. Right. Talk big. But that changed a lot. So when you love, if I go back and I say, Luciano, just love yourself, then I don't need to prove. So now in my 40s, I said, I don't care what people think. That changes the problems I pursue, if something doesn't work, it's not the end of the world. It's not the end. When you stop proving who you are, you relax.
Yes.
You relax. And it's the best thing that ever happened to me. And I'm very grateful for that. And those happen in the moments when you fail big time. In fact, my second divorce, I had to reflect.
Yeah.
You had to sit down and say, what I'm doing.
You got to look at an engineer and you got to say, like, okay.
Yes, you had to sit down and take notes and review how you make it better, how you become better.
Yes.
And all of that, this is why challenges are important. You need them. And when you reflect, you become stronger. And all of that, it started as the move, right? And reaching that moment when you love who you are and you're at peace, your life will change. How you do the problems. When we write papers, we write the papers we need to write. And something that I'm super proud when my students graduate, when I see students like you and that we're drinking, we're talking about an idea, and you go and you take it and you do it and you excel. those are things that make me proud. And I'm very proud to have spent this time with you because I see your potential. And I'm telling you, I know I've said it before, but I really see this podcast to be a major transformational change in this country. And I'm very proud of you for taking the time to talk to me, but also for asking the good questions. And I hope one day, and I recommend this, to ask few people, and you will see, because I think it's the students, they see that, wow, this is the journey of Professor Castillo. And if you look other people's journey, very rare you have a journey of privilege.
Right.
Most of us come from humble beginning, especially people of color. And that journey, even though it's painful, has been very rewarding. I mean, if I live my life, I was saying before, if I go back, I would be the person that I am today.
Absolutely.
Who I am. And I'm so grateful to have lived this life, the life that I'm being given. And I think that I know you would take it and you would go very far. And I'm saying this in public because I want you to do it. I was said to Brandon, I know you will be in CNN, man. I know, I can see it. I can see you doing that.
Absolutely.
And doing this.
Right.
Because this is the things that people we need to bring outside. Sometimes we give people, okay, you need to take the SAT, you need to take this, you need to do this. But learning people's story could be a game changer.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, there was something you said earlier in the podcast when you're talking about, building a road or fixing the road. I feel like that's kind of like what you're doing and also what this podcast is doing. It's going through the road and then realizing, there was a pothole back there or, the sign's not, it wasn't, I got turned around because the sign was turned differently. So I think what we're doing here is we're re-engineering the road to success. Okay. You've reached success. Okay. Or you've reached this level. However, the road wasn't perfect, right? Which is why you struggled. And sometimes struggle is good, but if we want more people to come back through this road, maybe we can tweak some things to make that road better. And maybe the next generation tweaks the road to make it even better.
I agree at some point, right?
Mm-hmm.
I do think that let me make clear, because I agree. I just don't want to say we need more people in the pipeline, right? We need more people with diverse background contributing to science and technology. And I think that every road that we have taken, it is the road that we needed to take at that time, right? But I also see that creating the means so more people get in is necessary. The road is not going to be easier,
for sure.
Right? Every student will have to
there'll be new
go
challenges,
to the lab,
right?
Exactly, and we need those challenges to grow the muscle,
absolutely.
Right? And I think that's critical. But I think this aspect of inequality, right? Let's make the playing field fair for everybody.
Sure.
And no, I totally agree with you.
Right. All right. So before we start to wrap up the podcast, are there any questions or anything you wanted to talk on? Anything you wanted to promote?
Yeah, I want to conclude to what I mentioned before. I do feel that a good podcast, I mean, all of these series that you're doing are excellent. But I think one is to talk about the failure and the importance why failures are needed.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not encouraging for people to fail, okay? Because there is even buzzword, fail and fail fast, okay?
No, true.
What I'm saying is that, and it goes back to what you were saying, you need to live a life of reflection.
Mm-hmm.
We will have to live our own path. And as we go, there will be things but within that, you need to reflect, right? Even you at your own age, you're defining your career. You're taking the risk.
Yes.
Right? You're taking time to do this, but you're doing it because you're making a difference in people's life. Nobody's guaranteeing you a secure path. Mm-hmm. But when you reflect on every day, every podcast, every experience that you live, every aspect of the journey, you become more clear on your path. Something that I did not say, Brandon, when I was doing my first consortium back when I was junior faculty, I follow what I feel inside. Okay. So when you're in tune with who you are, and then you listen to you and you take time to be quiet, you will find the right path for you.
Gotcha.
Okay. In the way the title of the podcast is B-Xcellent, excellent. Every human being need to pursue excellence.
Yes.
No doubt about it. The level of success, the meaning will be different for each of us.
Absolutely.
Each path is gonna be different. But for you and all of the everybody, take time to identify who you are, why you want to do this. Don't do it because it's cool. Don't do it because everybody else is doing it. Do it because you're passionate and you believe on it. The whole world will follow you if you're passionate.
Absolutely.
As a leader, people don't want to follow a leader that doesn't know why they're doing something. When you're convinced why you're doing it and you're going to do it with and without them, people will join you.
Absolutely.
Look what you have done.
I definitely agree. So to wrap up, I wanted to say thank you. It's been amazing having you on the podcast. Learned a lot today. One, stay hungry with your questions. I think something I didn't mention before is like, ask yourself, are you learning? I think that's an impressive thing that like it's underrated because a lot of time you focus, I got to get the degree, but are you learning anything while you're getting the degree? And if you're not learning anything, this degree may not do what it's intended to do for you. Give yourself confidence, all right? Believing in yourself, love yourself. That way you can get out of the way of your own success, all right? Sometimes the mountain that we find in front of us is not society all the time or not external, it's internal. We're standing in our own way. And we'll get some more people on this podcast. And I think you brought up a good point. Let's talk about failures.
Yes.
And we don't have to focus on how you failed, but like maybe even just how you failed forward in the sense of like picking yourself back up. You fell, you scraped your knee, but then you got back up. I think that's important to go over. So,
Brandon, and there's a strategy for everything. And you could build a strategy to learn quickly from that.
Yes.
And move forward.
Absolutely.
You mentioned something about learning. This is the key in life. You pursue a job, you pursue anything in which you are learning and growing. At the moment you stop, whatever that you're doing has to stop. Okay? That means in relationships, that is true for your career, your title. If you're working in an environment and you're not learning and growing, you need to get out of that train quickly.
Absolutely.
And that's my number one criteria in relationships. If you're not growing, you're not learning, it's time to move out.
Absolutely.
So this has been a great journey, Brandon.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
I'm very proud of you. I'm very proud of you.
So I'd like to ask the audience who have listened to the podcast, if you want, comment, subscribe if you're on YouTube, and ask some questions. What are some things that, you do to stay academically fit? Some people who listen to this are faculty members themselves, and they might have their own advice. So help us out in giving these students more advice. This podcast serves anyone. It can't serve anyone if it doesn't first serve you. So therefore, help us out, give us advice, what you want us to hear us to talk about. And so help me make this podcast better and even greater. And until next time, be excellent.